Hey everyone, welcome to Module 5. This is your Module 5 lesson video. This one might go a little longer just because I'm going to go over kind of everything for Module 5 right here. So have some paper and a pen next to you. Be ready to do some writing. Be ready to start and stop the video a little bit. And you might need to come back to this one throughout the week if you haven't been doing that before. There are going to be a few steps here to what we're doing this week, and I wanted to cover it all in one video so you have it all in one place. Also, there's going to be resources throughout the video, and I'm going to include PDFs and links to those at the bottom or underneath the video on the lesson page so that you can access some of these things. There's going to be poems. There's going to be some information about workshopping and whatnot. So there will be those resources for you. You may have already seen them linked underneath the video. So sit back, relax, and let's get started on the Module 5 lesson. Now, this week, we're going to talk about you as a writer. Hopefully, you're starting to, if you didn't feel like you were a writer before, maybe you're starting to feel yourself kind of like step into that identity a little bit more, maybe see yourself a little bit more as a writer. Maybe you're just getting to be a little more comfortable with that idea. And we're going to look at ourselves as writers within community. Writing is often seen as a very solitary endeavor, and it can be. And that used to be maybe something that was kind of lauded or praised about writing. And writers, the really great ones, were kind of reclusive and kept themselves away from society. But in our current world, that's just not the way it is. Writers, as soon as they start getting any bit of success, their publishers say, okay, it's time for you to get out in the world. You need a podcast, you need a social media presence, you need to be in the community. That's one way that writers are part of community. But before you even get to that point, we can practice being in community before that publication ever happens. And the way that we do that is by sharing our work with each other and getting feedback on that work. And allowing yourself to be part of that kind of a community where you share your work with others and you take their feedback and you share your feedback on their work, it just builds this beautiful reciprocal energetic group of writers that can really feed each other and help each other along the way. um, you don't have to be like-minded with the people that you are writing with. You can be very, very different. In fact, all of my best workshop groups that I've ever been a part of have been ones where I have been in a group with people who were very, very different from me in many, many ways. And those are some of the most sacred and wonderful experiences, the biggest growth experiences that I've ever had in my entire life as a writer and as a whole, just overall. So don't worry too much if you feel like, oh, I don't know if I really, if there's anybody like me here. I don't know if people think the same things that I do. I don't know if people feel the same way about things as I do. Don't worry about that because when writers come together and just spend time in the work with each other, that stuff kind of fades away and it just becomes this beautiful community activity. Okay? So this week, we're going to write a new poem. And like I said, have some writing supplies nearby so that you can kind of come and go from this video and do the work as you're going through the video. And then we're going to learn how to respond effectively to each other and build writing community and give helpful feedback in a workshop. All right. So let's do the writing part first. Before I go over any kind of content with you in depth, let's just write something new, okay? This might be my favorite writing prompt ever. We start by reading Maggie Smith's poem, beginning with a let me start over. We we start by reading Maggie Smith's poem called Poem Beginning with a Retweet. All right, let's take a look. If you drive past horses and don't say horses, you're a psychopath. If you see an airplane but don't point it out, a rainbow, a cardinal, a butterfly, if you don't whisper, shout, albino squirrel, deer, red fox, if you hear a woodpecker and don't shush everyone around you into silence. If you find an unbroken sand dollar in a tide pool, if you see a dorsal fin breaking the water, if you see the moon and don't say, oh my God, look at the moon. If you smell smoke and don't search for fire, if you feel yourself receding, and don't tell anyone until you're gone. Isn't it great? I love that one. Let that sink in for a minute. She takes us all the way from something that saw on Twitter back in the day when it was Twitter and literary writers were still there. Not so many of them are still there. All that aside, this is a tweet from several years ago that just said, if you drive past horses and don't say horses, you're a psychopath. Okay, now let's talk about it in a little more depth. What is Miss Smith doing here? Side note, Maggie Smith is a writer out of Idaho, or not Idaho, Ohio, and she is a wonderful poet. She teaches at Ohio State University. She's quite well known in literary circles. I had the honor of being a fellow with her at the Kenyon Writers Workshop probably about 10 years ago now. So over time, that will age in this video. So I believe it's 2016. She was the poetry fellow and I was the fiction fellow at the Kenyon Writers Workshop in the summer of 2016. And that was really, really fun. Anyway, and one other thing that's really cool about Miss Smith is she has had one of her poems go viral. It's called Good Bones. You may know what I'm talking about. You may have seen it on social media. It's been on a TV show. She's gotten a lot of recognition. So she's really known as someone that's kind of like more modern day Maggie, or not Maggie, what's wrong with my words today? A more modern day Mary Oliver type, like who's very well known. So, anyway, what is she doing here in this poem? She's using microblogging social media for inspiration. So, social media where posts are less than 300-ish characters, give or take. And like I said, someone somewhere tweeted, if you drive past horses and don't say horses, you're a psychopath. She liked that line enough to use it for the poem's first line and essentially to make its whole point. She lists all kinds of outdoorsy things that we can notice and point out. There can be a lot of shades of meaning to this, but overall, she's pointing out what we notice and what it says about us when we don't. She ends with a very personal message about not noticing yourself and not letting others know when you feel something about yourself disappearing. Side note, around the time she wrote this poem, she was going through a very difficult marriage. So that may inform our reading of it a little bit. Notice how her whole work here is grounded in the very specific objects and images of the world and how we just have to call them out. A rainbow, a cardinal, a butterfly, an albino squirrel, a deer, a red fox, an unbroken sand dollar in a tide pool, a dorsal fin breaking the water, the moon, smoke. But she ends with a point about herself or oneself that can be a really common inner experience. If you feel yourself receding, and you don't tell anyone until you're gone. I just love those last two lines. Now, here are a couple of poems that were inspired by this tweet. She kind of started a trend when she did this. And so, what ended up happening is she posted it on social media, and then other people began to imitate it. And they would just imitate it anonymously and post it to whatever social media they were using. So here's a couple of examples of some imitations that showed up on social media after she did hers. This one is called A Tweet That Fueled a Poem after Maggie Smith. I don't like puppies. I like old, streetwise dogs who put a paw on your arm and stare you down like they're proposing one last casino heist. I don't like flowers. I like trees with huge limbs that sway in the wind like they're dancing to a slow song. I don't like stars. I like glowing spheres of gas that shine like they hold the knowledge of the entire universe. I don't want a love song. I want a whole symphony assembled to convey the fervor of a lovesick heart. I don't want a Polaroid picture. I want a memory that clings in my mind like the vines on a tree, unwilling to let go. I don't need a water park. I need a life raft built strong enough to survive the treacherous, treacherous waters of the world. Here's another one. Inspired by a tweet written besides Maggie Smith. Notice the attribution to Maggie Smith in the title both times. Very important because it's a kind of imitation, so you always want to credit the person you're imitating. Let's read this one. This is like being awake during your own surgery. This is watching a plane crash and not running to help, a fire, a tornado, a hurricane. This is a car accident, hit and run. This is being the voice of the innocent and not using it for good. This is being a parent who doesn't care for their child. This is pushing religion onto non believers. This is many men deciding women's rights. This is a corrupt government with loyal followers. This is not, it is not my America. Again, an anonymous author written quite a few years ago already. So funny how I read that one right now and I see that, I mean, this could be it kind of in many ways could be read from different parts of the political spectrum, but but this one goes quite political by the end, doesn't it? And again, it doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't take away from anyone for us to bring these poems into the conversation too, and be together and in conversation about the hard topics as well. All right, now, given those three poems we just read, the original and the two imitations, it's your turn. I want you to go visit X, formerly Twitter, Blue Sky, or Threads, because those are our three main that I know of at the moment right now at the making of this video. Now, this video will go on to go into the future a little bit. So if more has come since the recording, you can add those to the list too. But right now, those are our three main microblogging social media platforms where each of the posts are somewhere around X is a little less than 300. I believe Blue Sky is 300 and Threads is 500. So lean towards the shorter ones. You can also use reposts of these from Instagram or Facebook if that's your thing. But here's what you're looking for. You're looking for a one sentence post that is striking in some way. Now, if you have an account on one of those, go ahead and browse around your feed or through the trending category with the intention of finding something that you would retweet. Okay. If you don't have an X, Blue Sky, or Threads account, go to Google and search popular tweets this week. That could also lead you to something useful. The goal is to find a tweet that you find somehow poignant or interesting, funny, or thought provoking. Okay, here, let's pop back to those and those poems we just read. So you can see in italics what the original tweet was here. The original tweet here was, I don't like puppies. I like old streetwise dogs who put a paw on your arm and stare you down like they're proposing one last casino heist. That's the tweet in that one. And then the rest of the poem is built from that. In this one, it's not italicized, but it's the first line. This is like being awake during your own surgery. So now you go find a tweet that you find somehow poignant or interesting, funny, or thought provoking. Once you've found your tweet, write a poem based on it in some way. Use Ms. Smith's original and these two imitations as your inspiration. You can write something similar, or you can take the poem in a whole different direction in some way. I just have two requirements. Number one, the poem must begin with the retweet. It's got to be the first line or the first several lines. Number two, the poem must be titled in a way that credits Maggie Smith. This was her idea. We are imitating it, so we always credit her. Okay? Now, stop the video here, go work on your poem. Come back when you've got something that feels like a first draft. It does not have to be anywhere near perfect. Just get it to where you want it to be in order for it to be read by someone else. Okay? Let me know via the inbox if you have any questions. Pause the video and then come back. All right. Now, if you're back, that means you have a poem read, or maybe you just want to go all the way through the video and get a sense of everything we're doing before you get started. Either way is fine, totally fine. Now, once the poem is written, I want you to submit it to the Module 5 discussion because that's going to house our writing workshop this week. The discussion is going to be where we share our poetry and we give feedback to each other as a writing community. All right? So once you've submitted the poem, or once you've written the poem, submit it to the Module 5 discussion, then you'll start giving feedback to others by reading their poems and posting responses. Now, I want to go over how to workshop a poem in 5 steps. I've gotten messages from some of you or seen comments on the discussion forums up to this point in our section on poetry where some of you say, I don't know much about poetry. I don't know if I'm doing this right. I'm intimidated by this. This is hard for me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's very normal, very natural. I often feel the same way, and I've been teaching for years. Um, and I've been in the company of people like Maggie Smith. So, it's just something with poetry. I think everybody in some respects feels like they're doing it wrong or like they don't know what they're doing. And that's just normal. So let's put that aside. But then let's also look at 5 steps that can help you give good feedback, like you know what you're doing. Okay? So, first, read your classmates' poems for comprehension first. Just try to understand them first. So, what helps me with that is I always start with 2 readings. My first reading is to help me see the poem both on the page and in my head. What does it look like on the page? And what is it showing? Like, what do I see in my mind when I read the poem? I want to see it visually first. And then I read it a second time to listen to it, to hear it, to hear what it sounds like, um, to hear what poetic devices might be there, how the language works, how the rhythm works, all of those sound related things, the music of the poem. I try to hear it in that second reading. Okay. Once you've done that, you should be able to start to comprehend what's happening. You can focus on the story and the feelings that the poem is communicating. Read it slowly. Don't worry yet about what you want to say about it because you don't know yet what you want to say about it. You still have to get to know the poem better before you can comment on it. So here, just um, read it to see it, to hear it, to try and understand it. Once you've done that, you go on to set the stage for your feedback, okay? Consider what overarching themes are you seeing and what are the characteristics of maybe the narrative voice? Who's the person speaking? Does it seem like it's the writer? It probably isn't because we have to remind ourselves that it isn't always the poet who is speaking in a poem. It often is, but it's not always. So you have to figure out who is that voice. Um, who's the person speaking? What is their tone? Who are they speaking to? What emotions does this poem make you feel? And now you can start to make some notes as you figure out the answers to those questions. Next, you've got to start finding what works. What is working? What's working in terms of language and literary devices? Once you've read for comprehension, you consider tone and voice, and you've read it again. Now get intentional about focusing on the language and the literary devices used. Which phrases do you find striking or imaginative? Are there any awkward phrases or sentences that might work better in a different place? Are there poetry devices that you can identify and you feel are working well to contribute to the poem's message? Are there any that seem less effective or could be removed? Make notes of both your favorite elements of the poem as well as the pieces you have questions about. Learning how to workshop a poem is just as much about learning how to provide respectful, supportive feedback as it is about writing. One tool that's really great when you're giving feedback on any kind of writing at all is the question. Instead of telling this writer what needs to change, workshopping is so much more effective when you start asking the writer questions. What do you mean by this line? This line kind of stopped me. This line over here was amazing. Why the change of tone here? Those kinds of questions can be super, super helpful. Next, find what's working in the structure and the layout. Read the poem again with a more particular focus on structure and layout. How does the poem's arrangement on the page contribute to its meaning? Are there line breaks or pauses that work particularly well or that you think take away from the poem's message? Make notes of your thoughts in the margin of the page and record any questions or specific moments you'd like to draw attention to. And then finally, fifth step, read the poem out loud. You should always, always, always read a poem out loud. It makes such a huge difference. And sometimes things occur to me when I'm reading a poem out loud that never would have occurred to me otherwise because I hear it audibly when I'm saying it out loud or when I'm going through the activity of reading it out loud. All of a sudden, I hear something in a different way, and all of a sudden, the light bulb will go on. So, uh, reading it out loud allows you to have those light bulb moments and identify both effective areas and lines and stanzas. And then it also helps you identify possible tongue twisters or things that might be harder to spot when you're reading the poem silently by yourself. So always finish by reading the poem out loud. Now, once you've taken each of the five steps above to thoughtfully read and review a poem in the discussion, it's time to share and discuss feedback. And I'd like for this workshop or for this discussion for you to go beyond just maybe one interaction, maybe have whole conversations and back and forths here. Really see this as a conversation as if we're around a table. Okay. Um, it's time to share and discuss feedback. This part of the workshop process may look different depending on whether you're providing one-on-one feedback for a writer or discussing a poem as a group, but the approach should always be the same. Here, it's kind of a combo of group and one-on-one because we're giving comments one-on-one, but we are seeing them as a group. So make sure, number one, make sure that your feedback includes as much of what you admire in the poem as you think could be improved. So I always like to think of it this way. I start with positive. I think of it as a sandwich when I give feedback. I start with all the positive things, and then I give some feedback about some things I have questions about or I'm wondering about or that maybe can be improved. And then I finish with positive. So you want at least as much positive as you have negative, probably more. Okay? Communicate constructive criticism with respect and support. You know how hard it is. We all know how hard it is to write something and put it out there in the world. So I'm sure you won't have any trouble communicating any feedback with respect and support. Ask questions. I've said this a couple of times. Ask questions to try and understand the author's motives or goals for their choices as you go. Okay. Um, that is something that helps them, but it also helps you because learning how to workshop a poem and how to consider poetry with an analytical eye only makes you a stronger writer. The more you analyze poetry, the more you ask questions and get answers, the better you can bring a reader's perspective to your own work. Every writer benefits from thoughtful, attentive review and feedback on their work. So don't be afraid to give it and don't be afraid to ask for it and don't be afraid to be part of the conversation. All right. Thank you for sticking with me for an almost 25-minute long video. As you know, there are several parts to work on here. Maybe you've done this step by step as you watch the video, or maybe you watched the whole thing and now you're going to go back and get started. Either way, let me know if you have any questions at all about the work for this week. I'll be happy to address them with you in the inbox. And I'm looking forward to seeing both what you come up with for your retweet poem and how you guys how we can all together enter conversation about those poems as well. So have fun, and I'll see you online.